Hello, world of LinkedIn. Hey, everybody on the interwebs. I am excited for another, sort of fireside chat situation in the world of SEO. My name is Garrett Sussman, Demand Generation Manager at iPullRank, and we are talking all about, yeah, right, Black Friday SEO. We're in the beginning of the second week of June, and we're talking Black Friday SEO. And I'm joined by two gentlemen on the iPullRank agency team in SEO land who, well, Mr. Zach Chahalis and Mr. Michael Glavac. Zach, I will have you introduce yourself, but tell me a little bit about your experience in e-commerce and SEO, and why are we talking about Black Friday now?
I'm Zach Chahalis, Director of SEO here at iPullRank. I've been in the SEO space for a little over a dozen years at this point. The vast majority of my experience, honestly, was within e-commerce. So working with things like asset navigation, understanding things along that realm, how to handle product launches, how to handle product filtering, things like that. So there's a lot of elements that need to be factored in there. But, Black Friday is always one of those interesting topics because a lot of folks don't think about it until really we get into the holidays. So, maybe consumers are beginning to think about this in the beginning of November. The problem is, most websites don't operate on that function where, things can be addressed that quickly, the beginning of November and have things up and running. So it's almost necessary to start thinking and planning out that Black Friday component now to make sure that you can have the things in place that you want to be successful when it comes to Black Friday or the holiday season as a whole, quite honestly. And then how do you continue to build on that and bring it into your future years?
It's so important too, because it's one of those things where, just depending on like the size of your organization and how quickly or slowly it takes you to get things done. Like, I hate to say it. I mean, there's some organizations where it's already too late. Like, you're in June and it's already going to be hard to get things, not really, but
Eh,
I mean, the true, and the other thing is, in the world of e-commerce, it's like you can't underestimate how important like that series of weeks and couple of months are leading up to it, just in
yeah.
terms of, like the expectation of revenue for an entire fiscal year depends on that, right?
Oh, well, maybe not entirely depends on it, but I mean, usually that Black Friday, Cyber Monday period is, 10x what your average daily performance is going to be, if not more than, depending on the group or the performance of the sales in question. So it's kind of one of those like, you need to make sure that you're thinking of it and planning for it appropriately, or you're missing out on that big revenue opportunity.
And to that point, it's really, we've learned, if you've, unless you're living under a rock, like the last 5 years, last 3 years, it's really hard to predict anything that could potentially happen between now and then. I mean, it was March when the pandemic happened in 2020, but like not only did that throw off everything, but the kind of dominoes that fall after that are like supply chain issues. And then like this past year, we're dealing with a recession, which like it felt like we were coming out of. And then, you're continually seeing conversations about it. Like, how normal do you anticipate this Black Friday will be from an economic standpoint, Zach?
Oh, that's a loaded question.
It is.
Honestly, tough to say. I mean, normal in like the sense of like the last 3 years, probably still going to be a little crazy, to be honest with you. I think the thing that's interesting to me is we're still dealing with shortages for things like supplies and materials. So, what's the impact of that? What's the impact on it, for consumer goods, electronics, cars, really everything else in the space? It's still going to be an issue. The downside to that kind of is, a lot of brands are not necessarily doing the level of discounts or promotions that maybe they had been doing in prior years. And that I think is going to hurt maybe some of the demand around Black Friday because I mean, typically people are looking for that deal, right? I'm buying that one thing a year, I'm buying a gift for someone, but then throw on top of it the way the economy is right now. You still have that drop in consumer confidence around spending in some areas. People are still spending money like crazy in others. But you also have just ongoing inflation on top of everything too. So does that then cause the combination of folks to be a little bit more conservative with their spending, combined with the fact that they're either not getting the deal or not getting the thing that they actually wanted to in the first place? I think that may continue. I think it may be a little bit better than what it was possibly last year, but it does depend on how the economy continues to change over the next couple of months too.
Right. And ultimately, to that point, I mean, like, we're going to see having a year to fix supply chain issues, whether anyone's better prepared in that sense. But we are SEOs. We want to talk SEO. And, there are kind of two aspects we're going to cover, three aspects we're going to cover through this conversation. And if anyone does have any thoughts or comments in the chat on LinkedIn, please feel free to leave them. We will try to get to everything that we can. But we're going to kind of talk about like preparation from almost a content perspective, preparation from a technical perspective. And then at the very end, we will touch on some of the innovations of search that we just need to be mindful of, whether it's, the search generative experience, Google Merchant Center Next, which we'll kind of touch on a little bit as well in the context of structured data. But all of these aspects that could ultimately impact the buyer's journey and the way that people search and the way that people discover information in a way that you would want to think about as you are putting new content or updating content or fixing things on your site. So first off, guys, from like kind of a content perspective, what would you prioritize? We're in June. Like, you really have to have everything good to go at the latest by August, I'd say. What would you guys say is the like cutoff point to have everything in a row?
I think it depends on the site or the way that the business operates, because to me, there's almost kind of two things that need to happen. You need to have some form of an evergreen type of experience, right? Where the biggest thing I've always recommended to clients is, hey, create your holiday pages, whether it's specific Black Friday or your other holidays, now, and keep them up in perpetuity. Don't take them down, don't retire them, don't 301 them, don't 302 them, etc. throughout the entire year. Create them now. So like, it's not a bad thing right now, if you don't already have these types of pages, to stand them up. And quite honestly, it's okay for it to be an orphan page in this type of situation. The goal is for it to maintain permanence in that way. But it can have things like evergreen pieces of content on it, or even just placeholder type content. I work with clients over the years where it's just like, hey, check back in early November for our fill in the blank year Black Friday deals on X, Y, and Z. And, in the interim, check out our current promotions, et cetera, stuff like that. And then you also need to start planning for what does that page actually look like when it comes to that holiday experience, right? Because your Black Friday deals more than likely probably won't be up for more than a couple of days, if not maybe a week or two at the most. But you still need that experience built out and ready to go. And I think there's a balance of understanding what is it you're actually selling and promoting and discounting. You may not know that till later, but at least start to plan out the content around the categories that you have and sell and probably will be discounting, as well as what that page template and format looks like.
To that point of like the 2 to 3 days, and maybe this will get into a little more technical. I saw a podcast a few weeks ago from Nick Wilson talking about Edge SEO and the idea of like changing up your navigation for Black Friday for those specific days without actually impacting your SEO for like a more sophisticated website. Is that something that you guys don't touch, or how do you think about that when it comes to it? Because that's something you'd have to prepare for. You can't do that at the last minute. We got controversial here too early.
I don't think it's controversial. I hate to be the it depends SEO, but it depends on what you can actually do. The number of sites that I've seen where like the amount of legal approvals, internal sign-offs, things like that you have to make to get a navigation change done, let alone the actual technical implementation of it, for a couple of days worth, is a challenge. I have seen other instances though where folks are either like I've worked with retail brands where they always have some form of holiday sale or promotion going on, and they just swap out that one element of the banner to, well, not banner, navigation, to reflect the particular holiday, and then that points to the new page. So if you can plan for something like that, that's great. I've worked with other retailers where they don't have the ability to do that on a ready basis, but they can do something like just pop in a banner or update their homepage promotional ad or things like that and point to it in that way. So I think it kind of depends on who you are and what you're capable of doing. But I mean, there is some benefit to having internal linking added in your navigation that's then pointing to this page that you want to try and get some authority to relatively quickly. Just you're also then relying on Google picking it up, understanding it. Navigation linking, that's not on every page, is not going to be as valuable. Some other form of linking, there's a lot of factors that play into that. But I think it just really depends on what you're capable of doing. But you still need some form of internal linking strategy to get authority and people to this page at that time of the year.
I think it's to your point, like all of these recommendations, and I just want to kind of blanket state this, is like it really will always depend on the context of your website, the context of your business. Sure, there are best practices, but the more sophisticated your business, you might have certain strategies. If it's a very easy, you don't have to get a lot of like approvals. It'll be, you'll be able to crank it out. Michael, I'm curious your perspective. What are some of the things, just blanket, generalized, that you would prioritize ahead of Black Friday?
Yeah, I mean, apologies for the tardiness. Telling someone I'm not available 3 to 4, and that's when they show up. But I think,
hey, it's not Black Friday, so you're
right. Yeah, I think, and it's funny too because I feel like I have like a slightly, I don't want to say it's a different perspective, but having worked in retail for Black Fridays and those times, like I think just seeing the change in the way people act around it too. You need to have a game, trying to think, like not wanting to use a major brand, but like Target, Walmart, Best Buy, like they'll have some Black Friday specific deals. Like the example, like I point to sometimes for people is like, you'll see these crazy gaming, like a Xbox with 5 games and a controller they're like, why don't you do that the rest of the year? It's like, well, they only make that bundle for Black Friday. So I think stuff like that, like there's a lot of stuff that's Black Friday only product. So, and I know they know what it's going to be well in advance. It's, if anything, I guess getting that stuff ready well in advance, just having worked with people that waited till the last second too. Like you knew what you were going to do, but didn't want to do it until the day before.
It just speaks to that point about like your business. Are you more organized? Are you planning in advance? Or is it the same old song where like things are going to be thrown at you as an SEO or a marketer way too late, and like you try to control what you can control and be ready for a wave. I'm very curious, really quick, going back, Zach, to what you were saying about standing up like an all day or all year holiday page or these different pages. If someone, not necessarily saying it's a mistake, but someone made the choice last year to have their URL of like Black Friday 2022, and it's there, and they've either forwarded it or it's still there. Like, say you're not doing the best practices that you normally recommend. What do you do today with pages like those?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of setting yourself up for the future, right? So I'll give an example. I used to work with an electronics retailer where every year they would do year-based pages, and they would just stand them up, and the pages themselves would even just be essentially an embedded PDF file of their print ad. Like no value whatsoever in that case. What we got them to do is like, all right, guys, like, look, you're kind of starting from scratch every year anyway. So let's do this. Let's create that more permanent page that does not have a year involved with it. So just call it, domain.com/Black Friday deals. And we did. We stood that up, and then we found the legacy pages that they had, and 301 redirected them and tried to garner any of the authority that they have coming in and trying to bring it into the new site. Because that's the thing is, depending on the industry that you're in, a lot of these retailers, especially the more well-known ones in the space, are getting links pointing to them from articles, from news promotions, from different sites like that, where you can still garner some of that authority and use it to build up a new page. Yes, you're going to probably lose some through the redirect and over time, just the decay in authority, but at least try and take some of that and use it to start off with. But it's never too late to start thinking about that permanence that you might want to look at. But it is a case of like, stop doing the things wrong now that are going to continue to hurt you. Try and put yourself in that right direction, but take what you have in the past and use it to move forward.
And to that point, like kind of moving forward as we start to think about like improving things like your product pages ahead of Black Friday, like a lot of these recommendations I feel like that we'd make are just generally, general good best practices for improving your product pages. But is there anything specifically that, different websites, retailers, manufacturers, brands should look at to improve those product pages starting now so they can benefit come Black Friday? Like, Michael, what are some things that you think are the most important there?
Outside of what's funny is like, I would like to tell people, keep it simple. Like, not even from an SEO perspective, like you want good images. Like, yeah, I can go into the SEO implications of it and all, like having if you have a bad product image, like if I come to a site with bad images, fuzzy, cut off, I instantly like degrade the value of that website. Like it could be bestbuy.com. If they have terrible images, you'd be like, well, okay, what's going on? Like there's that negative value that a user is going to attribute to it. And I think, just out the gate, like if it's bad images, like useless images too, like stuff that doesn't help convey what the product's for. I think that can kill you instantly. And then from there, I mean, just having I feel like there was this crusade. It's kind of still going on depending on where you go. I feel like there was this crusade of you need to write all the words for everything. I feel like a product, I almost feel like it needs to be short and to the point. Like don't overcomplicate it. Yet again, just kind of keep it basic. Keep it like, I want to be able to like, and what does it do? Like, don't be like, oh, this, this phone takes vivid, high def, bright colored night photos and during the day, like just throwing in all the words to try and hype up the product. Like most people know what they're looking at this point. Unless it's some obscure, new brand or off brand. But, I think keeping, good images and clean, short descriptions is a better way to go.
It's an interesting discussion, I actually think, because I do feel like, and we'll kind of talk about this a little later at the end of the call, is like we are going to see more long tail queries when people are searching for specific products. To that point, do you think it's important to not like fluffy marketing jargon? Like I hear that of like just saying like, words that don't actually mean anything. But if you go to like an Amazon page and you get your product description, you get, I'm excited to hear what you have to say, because it's like, I would say like product description, you have all the specs, you have the FAQs, you have user reviews, and obviously a lot of that's UGC user generated content. But do you think Amazon pages are bloated and too much?
I'm full disclosure. I like to call myself frugal with my spending, which, I'm kind of cheap on some things. Like I will look for the Dyson knockoff fan on Amazon, but there's nothing worse than having to absolutely dig forever through a description. Like, how big is it? What are the settings? Like, and there's these, like, to the point of bad images, especially when you're on like a mobile device. Like you see like an image is this wide, but really you get this and you got to scroll left and right on it. And it's like, improve the airflow through your home. And I'm like, I need it to cool me off when it's hot. Like, how many settings are there? Does it rotate? How long is the cord? Like, just stuff like that you can't find. And then you got to scroll through answers. I think that's kind of what I get at. Just give like the basic stuff. And not to your point, fluff it up and like just bloating it for the sake of capturing all those searches.
What do you think, Zach, from an SEO perspective? Like, is all the content, the written content, helpful, or is it distracting, as Michael's saying?
Helpful for who? I think it's helpful to a point, right? I mean, there's some element of, depending on the product I'm looking at, yeah, there's some value in seeing the reviews and the FAQs and all of that detailed information, and then the redundant product descriptions that they put on every other page. But again, it depends on what you want. I can appreciate a fully fleshed out product page like that for certain things, but I don't really need 5,000 reviews and 20 FAQs for toothpaste, right? Like,
right,
it's toothpaste, but it depends on what it is. So I think there's an element of that's your factor there. But I think from an organic search perspective, it's definitely beneficial to the search engine to understand in that case, to a point. I mean, it all goes back to the idea of how unique the content is and how valuable it is and everything like that. So it's certainly an interesting conversation, but I mean, Amazon's also the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Back when I did a lot of retailers that competed directly against them, although now pretty much everyone's a retailer competing against them, but let's say the consumer electronics space. Amazon wasn't doing anything. They weren't doing structured data. They weren't doing FAQs. They weren't doing any of the stuff that we would think about to support technical e-commerce sites. Maybe it has some okay URL structures, and even that's still a joke. They were getting every benefit and feature anyway. So where I had to work for my retailer client to get things like featured snippets and rich results, they didn't have to do that, and they were getting them naturally. Is that a preferential treatment thing from Google? I don't know if I want to open that can of worms. But is it also a case of like this being the biggest retailer in the country, in the world, maybe? Maybe not the world. But, you know, them just getting the benefit because they're an 800-pound gorilla in the room. And if it wasn't done in that way, it's technically a poor user experience for people on Google. That, I think, is more the factor that we're looking at there. So it almost necessitates smaller brands or someone that's just not Amazon having to do this type of stuff to keep up and hopefully at least have a place at the table.
Gotcha. So from your perspective, all of the technical SEO stuff that we're going to kind of jump into next is table stakes for everyone that's not the top whatever for each e-com kind of industry.
At least to a point, yes.
Okay. Yeah. So those, let's dive into some of those. Like, what are the critical, like, pre-Black Friday technical SEO audit things that every business should start now, like ramping up to the holiday season? Zach, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing I'll call out for any retailer or e-commerce site whatsoever is making sure that your faceted navigation is in line, essentially, right? Because most of these sites that have some way of choosing either filters or applying some type of element here or some facet to the page. And a lot of sites don't really handle that very well, either causing a lot of duplicate content or a lot of thin content or just indexation bloat, poor crawl budget optimization. Right? There's a lot that's going on in that realm that folks need to be looking at and prioritizing the pages that you do want to rank. Do you need, I'll go back to my consumer electronics example being in the video game space. Do I need a Xbox One controller that is red, that is from this brand, that is used, and that is a 5-star rated product? What are you getting down to at that point in terms of the value of that page versus just having Xbox One controllers? And so there's a little bit more value in getting that type of element sorted. So that way you can direct search engines to the pages that are important to you and what you want to index. But I think beyond that, there are elements of making sure like your internal linking is in alignment. You want to focus on getting people and search engines to those most valuable pages. And then, of course, I'm going to say structured data. because that is a big component of any e-commerce site, especially when you want to make sure that your product information is accurate in product schema, not only for search engines to understand for the rich snippet benefit, but also because that validates a lot of what goes into your product feed for Merchant Center too. So you want to make sure that all this stuff is in alignment. And there's plenty of other things I can say, but I also want to take the entire list here.
No, and to that point, before you dive in, Michael, I do want to call out, and we're jumping around a little bit here, but if you watched the Google Marketing Live, event that happened a couple of weeks ago, Zach mentioned Google Merchant Center. And historically, you had a lot of control over your product feed and, basically giving Google, from an advertising standpoint, but ultimately organic, information about your product so that it would show up in Google Shopping, organically. You get these rich snippets, aside from your structured data. While you still are able to do that, one of the announcements that Google made at this Marketing Live event was that this new version of the Merchant Center, Google Merchant Center Next, is actually going to depend much more on your website than just the product feed and what you put in there. So all those images that Michael mentioned, all the structured data that Zach is talking about, all the information about your product that you're providing to Google will be more effectively scraped from your website and influence your search results than the past. I don't know if either of you guys want to speak to that.
I mean, yeah, frankly, good. And yes, I'm aware of this announcement, but I'm just being me. One of the biggest things I've always seen, and because I've done this on both the SEO and the paid front for several years across retailers, is folks actually struggling to create a proper product feed for Merchant Center. And that's either an element of like, we don't have a tool, or our product SKU list is too big, we don't know how to format it, we can't get the data up to date. There's a whole wide variety of reasons. And while there's a lot of companies out there that can do this for you, not everyone can get the budget allocated to do something like that. There's a client that I spent many years working with where every month I was generating them a new product feed using Screaming Frog because they didn't know how to do it. So I think it's very valuable that switching over to the website basis. I mean, what it used to be a few years ago is you would use structured data to validate the information in your product feed when you couldn't update it frequently enough to reflect proper pricing. Now, if you can just have that proper information reflected on your site and then it gets picked up on, that's going to be a lot more efficient for everyone, quite honestly, in the long run, especially the folks that can't make these feeds.
Right. And to that point, I think there's a lot to think about as we talk about retailers and brands and who's affiliate selling your products, like getting everyone on the same page with the shipping information and the discounts and whatnot, because it could be a major like dumpster fire if you get to Black Friday and Google is just providing all different sorts of information. And customers ultimately hopefully don't get angry at you, but you got to try your best. And that's a really hard thing to navigate. That's so much more than SEO and content, is navigating those relationships and getting all your ducks in a row. So Michael, back to you. Zach kind of listed off a few of these key pre-Black Friday technical SEO audits. What are some of the other ones that come to mind for you that you prioritize?
Yeah, and it's a little bit SEO and a little bit your inventory, and it comes from working with a 3PL previously. How you're going to handle out of stocks, like making sure you have a plan in place before it happens, because you can do out of stock or back order, or is it coming back? Like having that plan in place before you hit the time, so you're not scrambling then. Not as much from the SEO side, but from a business side, hey, if we're going to get it back, let's do back orders. We'd still take some, but then also still you're sending signals to Google like, hey, yeah, we're going to get it back in, keeping that instead of the out of stock, there's a better chance, it's not going to show up anymore and things to that nature. So I think kind of to tack on and all the other stuff that's been said, I think that's one area to be prepared for, because there's, like I said, how are you going to handle that?
It's interesting too, because that's a whole different conversation too, around maybe a little bit of the ethical nature of handling that type of conversation too. But I did work with a retailer at one point where, like, let's say it was out of stock online, but they had 4,000 stores and it was in stock in one of those stores somewhere. And you had a pick up in store option. Technically, it's still in stock. Or folks that just couldn't properly pass along the data that it was out of stock or backward or whatever it is. But yes, there are structured data fields that also support all this as well if you can properly do it. But yeah, you need to plan out what that strategy looks like.
And to that point about structured data, I know this is your kind of your wheelhouse, like you love talking about it. To what extent we know a lot of websites don't get this right. Like even really well-established websites that should be on top of it, like whether it's too many, hoops to jump through or too much of a legacy tech situation. How important are the basics versus how advanced and as specific should you be getting for structured data? Where's the opportunities?
Specifically in product, I mean, there's almost kind of no difference between advanced and basic in this case, because you really need to do everything in order for that to be properly reflected. So if you think about a product schema, for example, you're going to require fields like the name, some form of a price field, and then typically it requires either, if you don't have the price field, some form of an offer field, or an aggregate rating or a review or something. So these things need to be filled in, but there's still additional information that's usually just readily available on the page and should be included anyway. So things like the product description, the image, the URL, which should be there anyway. If you're marking up multiple products on the page, though, there's also an element of complexity around different SKUs or how you differentiate the variations or the price points or things like that. So there's a lot that needs to be done there in order for that to be done properly. But I say that because if you think about the rich snippet that you get for having that information, you really kind of need all of it in place in order to get everything as possible, because there's so much that would show up with product schema where you have the star rating, the number of reviews, the price point, potentially now the shipping information, which can also come in from the merchant center. But there's a lot of information there that you really can't miss out on these key fields. But you also need to make sure that you don't have any errors, redundant information, conflicting information in these scripts too, because it can cause Google to potentially ignore that structured data for the entire page, if not possibly for the entire site, depending on how bad it is. Like I've seen instances where a site has two product schema scripts on the same page, and each one's showing different aggregate rating information. At that point, you're confusing Google, right? Like you're sending conflicting information. They don't know what to do. They're more than likely going to ignore it versus try and figure out for you on what's going on there. Now, other structured data types, it depends on what you're trying to do. But I'm a big fan of the idea of tying in entities and EAT into structured data. And there's a lot of element that can be tied into something like an organization or a corporation schema that defines that entity around the business or the brand, plus any type of person schema around an author, or if there's any articles that are on the site or a blog or anything like that. All these things can be tied in effectively and can be built out, but it really depends on what it is that you're supporting and what you're doing. But really, if you're an e-com site and you're not doing product schema correctly, I would say that's a big miss. And then I would throw in it's probably as my number two for those cases. Everything else kind of depends on the site and what you're actually supporting.
It's interesting to me of like, I feel like for those who don't do it, it feels overwhelming. And for those who do it, they know it's just kind of like, you walk through the checklist and make sure that everything's covered across your entire product.
It's worth noting too that like a lot of platforms are actually getting better at handling this out of the box too. Working with, I hate to say Shopify, but I mean like Shopify, it does a fairly decent job of doing product schema out of the box. This is exactly how I would want it. No, there's some things I would do differently, but it's not bad. But then you look at some of the other ones too. Like I've seen Squarespace do it. I've seen Wix do it. I've seen even some of the bigger guys like a Salesforce Commerce Cloud or a Sitecore do it, where it's getting better and better with some of these platforms out of the box, but there's still areas of opportunity where it could be done better.
And I feel like the other component I'm very curious about your guys' perspective is as e-commerce SERPs evolve, and we're not even talking about SGE yet, just the fact that there's so many image packs for a product, any sort of like product query, right? And you click on those image packs, and now you have that kind of insert kind of product information, right? That'll show the different brands and retailers and have all that information. How are you thinking about auditing your brand? Are you thinking it just from the organic SERP result, or are you thinking about this product pack, if you will? Michael?
Yep, I got it. I mean, I don't want to say it depends because I've been chuckling every time I hear it, but it depends. I'm definitely going to look at, if anything, looking at both. Kind of want to all encompass like what's going on. Like my thoughts is what's going on out there right now. But to that point, is it going to change come Black Friday? Because let's be honest, search intent around Black Friday is going to change. And I think if you kind of pick different things Google has said over the years, maybe read between the lines a little, like as Zach brought up, and we talked earlier, like not having a 2022 or dated page, blowing out beyond Black Friday, it's like, okay, like let's say I have one for each holiday. You got a Halloween page and a 4th of July page, and you run that year over year over year, based on, like if you take Google saying, hey, if your website was a scammy website for 15 years, or not your website, but the URL was a scammy URL for 15 years, and you buy it and change it, we're still going to think it's a scammy URL for a while. Okay, well, if that's how the logic works, can that same logic be applied then? Well, hey, I got this URL that's been Black Friday deals for 5 years, and every year it's Black Friday deals. So does that mean come Black Friday, your system's going to recognize, oh, hey, this page is going to be coming back full, and start to get more of that, on top of building what you've already built on it, can you establish these rhythms with Google of like, hey, it's Halloween, we need to show the Halloween page, or it's Black Friday, let's get that page. I think that's kind of more so like where I've kind of started leaning with some things there. Because outside of that, I think products specifically, I feel like it's kind of bloated with listicles still. And I'm kind of hoping to see some of that go away. And I don't know how you necessarily combat that if you're selling one product.
I don't think listicles are going anywhere. I'll hold that kind of opinion till we get to SGE. But Zach, what you seem like you had some thoughts on the kind of that in SERP product product display versus your just organic results.
I mean, everyone has opinions on everything. Look, I don't hate it, right? But I think it entirely depends on the type of search I'm looking for, the type of query, the type of product. Is it something that is more visual? Again, like I don't need product grids and images for toothpaste. I don't care about something like that. It really just depends on what it is that I'm looking at in that case. So I think there's value in it. I think it might change the experience for folks that are a little bit more visual. I mean, what's been the whole perception of like Best Buy over the last, let's say, decade or so, right? It's a place where you can go to test and try and see something without actually buying it, because then you're going to go buy it on Amazon probably for cheaper. Not always the case, but that's just the general perception that folks have of it, right? So it's kind of a similar thing with like, or maybe it offers all folks the ability to see more of something directly in SERPs and give them a better experience in that case. But they're still going to have to essentially end up somewhere to buy something.
Yeah, no, I mean that I think that's again, I think about that a lot, to your point about it. And this is the thing with e-commerce is you really need to think about your product, how someone's searching, whether it's a high value, low value, if it's a big product, a small product, like just furniture. We were talking about photos earlier, and my wife and I, we were looking for like an outside small table, and we had a very specific thing in mind, but we wanted to see, like what people what it looked like, what user generated images actually look like, so we could get a sense of it. Whereas like toothpaste, it doesn't matter. Whereas like a mountain bike, you want to know all the specs, and that kind of leads to some of the search generative experience, which is this new, I do want to give you guys a chance to talk about, which is this kind of new version, this AI generated version of e-commerce, which, so Zach and I, you and I have talked about, when we're talking about e-commerce, Black Friday, all that stuff, we've had product review updates over like 6 product review updates over the past year and a half, 2 years. A lot of it was leading up to Black Friday last year. And I wouldn't be shocked if any of this search generative experience rolls out ahead of Black Friday this year. The reason I say, was joking about the listicle stuff with you earlier, Michael, is that I feel like a lot of the insights that are being pulled for existing queries and these AI queries going forward are from the affiliates who are doing these deeper dives into the product than the brands themselves are doing. And as long as those types of content, whether it's buyer guides or just like whatever is driving the affiliate marketing, is incentivized to, by Google to, be ranked highly, and that's the information that a lot of consumers want, the listicles are going to continue to happen, and it's still going to be really important for brands to appear on those listicles, which is why my argument says, like, I think they're not going anywhere just because Google's not going to stop incentivizing them anytime soon. Michael, what's your take?
No, they're definitely not going anywhere. And like, I'd be lying if I said they're all terrible. They're not. And I do get the frustration of people that get sick of seeing it. Like, yeah, I get it. But also, when I go to do a new thing, I'm always like, I don't even know. I can't think of something good, but like the example Google used in their presentation, like, I'm gonna go hiking. I need to go, or I was looking for hiking poles once. This is like what to look for in a hiking pole. What are the best hiking poles? And then like, yeah, okay, I know how to quickly decipher what's a little better than the rest just from being in the space. But I mean, it's not like they're not invalid, and it's not written by the company, because obviously the company's not going to give you, here's the things wrong with our product. So they'll definitely serve a point. I'm on the fence with SGE as a whole, and I personally don't see it rolling out before Black Friday, because I think unless it comes out, or let me take that back, I don't see it being, if it's not out by the beginning of October, maybe end of October, I don't think they're going to do it, because I think if they were to be like the week of, be like, oh, guess what everybody gets to try to this week, I think businesses would freak. And like, if you had some weird instance where, and this is not saying it's possible, but if people figure out how to game it, or some weird thing where they can't make a fix, right? Like if it's, right before Black Friday and people figure out, oh, if I do X, Y, and Z, I'm going to push all my products into the SGE results. And, like, I just can't see Google doing something like that at that time. After, for sure, but not before, in my opinion.
I mean, but they rolled out the product reviews like weeks in the middle of the season, the product reviews update, and that impacted a lot of people. I don't disagree with you. My whole thought process was, and Zach and I talked about this last year, is like, in around this time last year, they were rolling out product review systems updates because it seemed like they wanted to get e-commerce right before Black Friday, and especially to compete with Amazon being like an e-commerce search engine in essence. And I don't think people had the greatest experience on Google. And so I feel like to your point, they didn't get it right. And they kept rolling out new updates, and people are still like, I'm not happy with the results. Right. I don't know if like they'll like wait.
I think my thought too around Christmas I don't think, and I could be very wrong. I don't think SGE works for Christmas. And I say that purely from the standpoint of I don't have kids. I got nieces and nephews. I don't go on Google and be like, what's a great present for a 10-year-old boy that likes to play video games? Like, I go ask him, hey, what do you guys want for Christmas? And then I'll look for that specific thing. I feel like around Christmas time, I think it's more of that. Now, I think, maybe more towards the older crowd it'll work because, what should I get my 70-year-old father that hates technology? Like, I don't know, but I could see it working there, but that I feel for like retail sales, that's a smaller number of the total sales because I just think from, most yet again, I could be wrong. Maybe it's just my experience. I feel like you get more gifts for kids and stuff, but hey, what do you want for Christmas? It's never like, I'm going to get you a gift. You just wait.
Dude, that's the curse of being a marketer or an SEO is like we are so in it on the daily that I'm not gonna lie, it's so important to discuss searching behavior with other people or like watch it or do research because it's like I struggle to step away from the way I even think about Google compared to parents, kids, wives, friends, whatever, people in different industries. Like everyone thinks about that's the whole thing with SGE is like the conversation is are people even going to use it? Like are people going to just skip it because like they just already don't like the results and they're not happy? Or are people going to take everything at face value? Or is it going to be somewhere in between? I know, Zach, you haven't used it a ton, but outside looking in, like from what you've seen, do you have any kind of just impressions that you want to throw out there?
All right, I'm sure there's going to be value and opportunity in this, and I'm sure someone's going to enjoy using it. Is it me right now? No, but I'm playing with it a little bit just because you're gonna have to. I don't. I see some value in it. I think for the right audience. I think to Michael's point, right? It it's maybe beneficial in the e-commerce realm for someone that is unsure what to buy, or if you're getting a gift for someone you don't know and you're afraid to ask them for some reason. Um, I think it's going to be one of those things that you have to kind of watch and see how it evolves over time. I mean, it's been a hot minute since I worked in retail. Like I'm like actually in a retail store. But even back then, you would get folks that come in like, I don't know what to buy. I'm just gonna buy a gift card. Like, I'm just kind of curious to see how many folks are going to take advantage of the experience. And quite honestly, I mean, you still see a lot of folks that are skeptical with the AI involvement in certain topic sets or queries or just on a day-to-day basis. I don't think you're going to be heavily convincing of, let's just say, an older audience type that this computer generated AI stuff is going to answer all your questions appropriately. Now, do they know? That's a different issue for a different day, different question. But I mean, I think some folks will end up using it. I just think it depends on the topic set, the query, what you're looking at in that sense. I do see some value in it to a point, but I hate to say again, it depends, but that's kind of where it gets down to.
Yeah. And that's why you got to know, you got to learn your audience, learn, and not even the end user, the person who'll use it to, especially for Black Friday. And that's a big thing that if there's one takeaway that I have people have from this whole thing is like, remember that a lot of times when you're doing your SEO and you're marketing on Black Friday, you're not even marketing to the person who's going to be using the product. You're marketing to the person who's buying. Right. Exactly. And how they're going to search for that product for Michael's nieces and nephews, or, like my wife, or whoever you're buying the gift for. It's
I can see it roll out for Black Friday. Is it smart? I don't. No. But I could see it happen. To answer your original question.
Okay, let's go round table. We're getting to the end. Biggest thing that, like, whether it's a pet peeve or biggest piece of advice that you would want to impress on people for Black Friday now, June, early June going forward, that they should pay attention to. Zach, why don't you start us off?
I mean, I think I kind of said already, like, you need to start building this stuff now. Pages, content, templates. Yes, you may not know the ad right now. You may not know the promotions or things like that. But you should get this stuff into a place now where you can just drag it later. I hate to say drag and drop it, but like, I mean, again, it's kind of in theory. Like, if you're a retailer and you're selling X, Y, and Z type of product, start building out that content, that template now. You know what your capabilities are with your platform. You know what your dev team looks like, what your tech debt looks like, what your backlog looks like. You should be able to start thinking about this stuff now and get those things into the queue that you're going to take some time to get done. Yes, you might need to edit the content later, but for the most part, folks that are on more modern CMS systems can do something like that at a later date. But you need to have some of that stuff built out now so you can start thinking about it and then continue to work with that stuff or maintain it into the future moving forward.
Michael?
Yeah, I think to go with things, go in the opposite direction. Things you shouldn't do. Don't launch a migration or a redesign the week of Black Friday. That is something I've actually dealt with, and I was able to convince them to push it off. Because their idea was, we're going to launch a brand new site on Black Friday and surprise our users. I'm like, you're going to surprise yourself more than anything else. I would not do that. But yeah, like as Zach said, get things in the pipe. If anything, get it in the pipe now, because you may be like, it's months away. Never hurts to be prepared before you need it. If something happened, you got it done by the end of July. Well, awesome. You have it. You can test it or make sure, if you have, now you can tweak and you're not scrambling 2 weeks before to make sure it's done. So.
And this is, to that point, this is that perfect time, because it's like, whether you're like on a fiscal calendar or just like the normal, like, business calendar of, like, we are at the third month of Q2, right? If you're thinking about things like that, we're about to go into Q3. If you're planning for Q3 and then ultimately Q4, then the stuff you're planning now, like if you haven't already, like, at the beginning of the year, but if you're like, 1 quarter ahead or 2 quarters ahead, this is when you put that stuff into the planning, like set aside time for it, either early on or at least by the end of the next quarter, to have things in motion so you're not caught with your pants down. Anyway.
Interesting hesitation there. But we said it before, right? Like, what's the revenue impact of Black Friday, Cyber Monday, the holiday season to you? Do you is this something that you want to risk not having ready in time to take advantage of, to the point where it bites you? And let's be honest, there are some retailers out there where their entire year, if not the entire survival of their company, is dependent on having a good holiday season right now. So you need to start thinking about and getting that stuff in place so you're not the one that looks bad getting into the holidays.
There you go. Okay, so this has been another LinkedIn Live. Really fun, interesting conversation. I mean, the three of us, we like kind of geeking out over this stuff. I love putting these guys in situations where they have to say it depends and then explain themselves of like why it depends on both sides. I mean, it's the nature of an SEO conversation, but you guys did a fantastic job kind of like explaining your perspective. I appreciate you taking the time. So once again, my name is Garrett Sussman of iPullRank, joined by Michael Glavac and Zach Chahalis, both of iPullRank as well. Got to throw it out there. Like, if you are planning Black Friday, you have an e-commerce brand or any type of brand, and you want some technical SEO roadmap in, getting things across the line, or even just like an agency to actually advocate for your projects, because, we all know the bigger the organization, sometimes it's hard to like get the ear of the top execs to be like, oh, this matters. Like to Zach's point about talking revenue, that's something that we can help with as well at iPullRank. So reach out to us, iPullRank.com. Other than that, we've got some other LinkedIn Lives coming to you over the next couple of weeks, consolidating websites, target audiences, some interesting stuff. So pay attention to us on the LinkedIn channel, and we will catch you next time. Peace out, guys.